morning, those of you that are joining us right now. If you've been with us before, you've experienced something different when you logged in. You had a kind of a waiting room that you didn't experience before. So I'm just watching the attendees list, and it looks like it's moving rapidly as you're all joining us. So we're just going to give it a couple, like maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute to have all of you join us, and then we'll get this wonderful webinar started. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. It looks like we have kind of slowed down on those of you that, well, we're waiting for people to enter the meeting. And again, I just wanted to say thank you for your patience this morning. Many of you logged in and saw something, a screen that was different than what you'd seen before. You might recall in the past meetings that you just watched Palmer and Patrick and I chit chat while we waited for the meeting to start. And we finally figured out how to kind of slow that down. So yeah, you guys all joined us at the appropriate time. So sorry that you didn't have any communication about this before. But good morning. Welcome to the 5th webinar in the PNACAC College and Career 101 series. Today, our topic is a holistic review process for applications. And again, we have the wonderful Patrick O'Connor joining us today to share his vast knowledge on this topic. My name is Ray Pepley, and I am a high school college and career counselor in Meridian, Idaho, and I'm co-chair of the PNACAC PD, Professional Development Committee, and my awesome co-chair Palmer is with us this morning as well, and he'll speak in just a second. But I just am grateful for all of you joining us today. If you're new, welcome. Those of you that have joined us for the other 4 webinars kind of know how this runs, but if you're new, just a couple things to know. This webinar will be recorded, and it will be sent to you via email in approximately it's probably about a week when that actually goes through the process of getting it on YouTube and then out to all of you. So it takes about a week. And then also our chat is disabled in the webinars, but the Q&A function is available. So if you have a question, please go ahead and put it in that Q&A, and Palmer and I will either be able to answer it privately, or we'll wait till the end of the webinar and share your question with Patrick. So Palmer, did I miss anything?
No, I think you did great. We're really so happy that Patrick O'Connor is able to do this for us. And he just stepped into the breach for us this year as we came up with this idea, as many of you know. And for those of you who don't know Pat, maybe you're new to this series, he really is one of the leading experts in the entire country on college admission counseling. As you can tell by looking at him, he's very old, very experienced, and very wise. Former president of PNACAC, author of books on college counseling. And yeah, I think with that, we can just get out of the way and let you take it. Patrick, thank you for being with us again today. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Palmer. Thanks,
wonderful.
Ray. Happy New Year to both of you, and Happy New Year to everybody watching. And appreciate you jumping in. Yeah, this is not an easy time of year for us to be doing seminars, because I know we've got midterm exams and scheduling for next year already, and I guess you got a few seniors trying to get into college too. So so there's an awful lot going on. And so really appreciate everybody taking the time. So great. We're going to talk a little bit today about holistic review. And I've got a PowerPoint here, so I'm going to see if I can hoist this up, and then also at the same time share my screen with you. Let's see here. Right. Okay. Yeah. Let's try that one. Right. And
Looks great.
Okay, good. All right. So hopefully you can see that. Kind of picked this one simply because here in Michigan it has not been a horrible, awful winter, but we sure haven't seen many little plants or a lot of sunshine. That tends to happen here in Detroit. So I thought we'd start with a reminder that it's only 45 days till pitchers and catchers report for spring training. So spring clearly is on the way. So there's how colleges do holistic review. And there's my email at the end. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to contact me at collegeisyours@comcast.net if I can be of help in any way. So great. So here's what we'll cover today. What is holistic review? Where did it come from? Why holistic review? Which actually there's a Palmer found a really timely posting on the NACAC e-list that talks about the need for holistic review. The parts, we're going to talk about the parts and just do sort of a little quick hit and run about each of them. Now, our next scheduled presentation for February is teacher and counselor letters of recommendation, which of course is part of the holistic review recipe. So we're not going to talk much about those today, but do come back in February. We'll have a big chat about those. And then of course, how colleges do holistic review. It's important for us to understand, if we're giving all this information to colleges, what do they do with it and what role does it play in the admissions process? So that's kind of where we are there, right? So, okay. So what is holistic review and where did it come from? A holistic review is basically the notion that students are more than a test score and more than a GPA. And whether you've been doing this for a while, as I have been, or whether this is your first year, you've undoubtedly run across already certain incidents where you have a student who's really capable and really with it, and you think is going to be great in college, but you're having a hard time convincing some colleges of that, either because their test scores, if the college requires them, their test scores may not be everything the college is used to seeing, or their grades may have suffered. In part, it could be sometimes it's due to the fact that they had a tough semester because of illness or family circumstances or COVID or anything really. Or it simply could be that they haven't quite put everything together to demonstrate their full capability in high school, but they may be, as I am prompted to say, a late bloomer, which means that, maybe once they get out of high school and college, they're going to pull it all together, which has certainly been the case for more than a few of my students. So holistic review is the idea that there is more to a student than simply their GPA and their test score. So that's kind of the theory that folks have been working off of. Where did it come from? Well, its history. Believe it or not, holistic review today is largely used to make sure that a college is not missing the opportunity to admit a very capable student. Interestingly enough, a good bit of holistic review's history, however, lies in the fact that it was first used by several colleges, but most notable was Harvard. And in that case, Harvard was not using holistic review to widen the circle of admissions, but rather was using holistic review to narrow it. And so the quick story there is around 1910 or so, Harvard started to use the predecessor to the SAT as part of their admissions process. And after about 5 or 10 years, what was clear to them was that their number of students applying who were at that time non-traditional students was increasing pretty significantly. And so, whereas Harvard used to be sort of a, all men, upper crust, upper society, privileged students from traditional conservative Christian backgrounds, they were now starting to see a more diverse pool of applicants, including a large number of students from that were of the Jewish population. So that and for some reason Harvard wasn't particularly crazy about that, and that's where they started to go to holistic review. So unlike today, where holistic review is largely used to try and keep opportunities open for a wider pool of applicants, its original intent was actually to try and limit access to certain folks, which is not always the happiest thing to talk about, but it is what it is. And just thought you might want to know that. So, and I guess it would also say that certainly holistic review received a significant boost when it during the COVID period, because and again that was not really more out of choice as it was out of a default option, because what we saw happening is that kids couldn't take the SAT because the SAT tests kept getting canceled, and as a result they didn't have any test scores. Well, it doesn't, if your college requires test scores and grades to get in, and the students can't get to the test, they can't apply to college. And that ultimately means that, again, colleges are either missing out on students that have great capabilities, or in some cases it meant that colleges were looking at not meeting their class size, which meant they were going to have to downsize or in radical cases close. So so holistic review has taken an uptick in its application and use in colleges in the last 3 years, primarily because of limited access to the SAT during times of COVID. So so that's what holistic review is all about. Why use it? Well, again, Palmer found this really sort of great current issue with a counselor who has a senior who is quite honestly quite brilliant, very talented, has demonstrated great commitment to the community, great academic promise in the classroom, and has put together a list of schools that includes some of the most competitive schools in the country. Well, I think we're all pretty familiar with the fact that one of the features of those competitive schools includes, for most students, a very high ACT or SAT score. And for reasons that nobody could quite figure out, this very capable student just couldn't break 30 on the ACT. Well, again, if you look at the average ACT scores on many of the schools he was interested in and very capable of doing work in, you would see that they're looking for 33s, 32s, 34s. There's not really a lot of room for a 30 at those schools. So this student would pretty much be out of luck if all they were doing was counting on his ACT scores to speak the truth about his capabilities. Fortunately, most of the schools he's applying to do engage in holistic reviews, so they're not going to look just at those test scores, but are going to move forward and really try to understand the entire student. And that's really the objective of holistic review. As I tell my students when I talk to them about when they're engaging in a holistic review, which of course includes student essays and possibly interviews, I tell them, everything else you've done is set in stone. Your grades are pretty much, they're not going to change all that much. Your test scores aren't going to change all that much. Your extracurricular activities aren't going to change all that much. Really, the interview and the personal statement or college essay, these are the places where you have a chance to really get past the numbers and show them the person that you are. And so this is the holistic review really gives the student and the counselors, for that matter, the opportunity to help the admissions committee at a college get past the numbers and really start to see the human being that's behind that application. And that's really necessary because let's face it, a lot of times it can be way too easy to just make this sort of a graph exercise, where you look at a student's GPA and you look at their ACT score and you decide if they're in or not based on that. And you could be really missing some really seriously talented students. So holistic review is designed to really sort of help colleges build a diverse class, build a better class, and to make a better assessment of each student based on who the student is, and less based on what the students' numbers might be. And that's why so many colleges are engaging in holistic review. Okay, so let's chat for a minute about what exactly goes into the holistic review. And I'm going to just quick jump out of this and put together, open up Microsoft Word so that we can chat for a minute about the parts of holistic review. There we go. Okay. Oh, sorry, gosh, this was all set up. Yeah, give me just a second, because I don't, that's a really tiny, there we go. Okay, yeah, that should do the trick. Okay, so, right, so
Patrick,
we're looking at.
Were you, Patrick, sorry to interrupt, were you hoping that we were going to see Word
Yes.
on the screen? We just have your PowerPoint, or I do at least.
Oh, golly, really?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
all
don't-
right, hang on just a minute.
Palmer, do you see Word on your screen?
I should try and kind of gaslight you right now and say, no, I can see exactly what he
Oh.
wants us to see, but no, I think we're all seeing the same thing.
Okay, good. Just
Well, okay. Well, all right.
no pressure, Patrick. Trust me.
Do you see anything different now?
Well, it looks like you're going to be typing into one of your slides.
Yes. Okay.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
That's
Okay.
all right. Okay. Well, we'll try and make this work then. So, right, parts of holistic review. Well, again, you know, I've mentioned quite a few of these already. I think the ones that many of us are familiar with, of course, are extracurriculars. If a college, you know, when a college asks for your list of extracurricular activities, they're not just, what they're saying is, you know, we want to know, we recognize that learning can occur in many places and it also occurs outside the classroom. And so they ask for extracurriculars to get a feel for that, but also get a feel for the students' interests, right? And so we want to, and so that's why they sort of seek this. So as we're helping students build their extracurricular list, we want to make sure that we keep in mind that the goal is to really give them a comprehensive sense of what the students' interests are and what learning opportunities they have had outside the classroom. And again, I realize this is not a seminar on extracurriculars, but I do want to put a quick word in for jobs. There are these, you know, again, when you've done this as long as I have, you see these patterns come and go, and we're just coming out of a pattern where it was not very trendy. Evidently, students thought it would be a bad thing to list working as an extracurricular activity. I am a big advocate of that, as are most colleges, because if you think about it, work opportunities really have, I mean, you learn an awful lot. I certainly learned an awful lot in my first couple of jobs, but it's also opportunities for leadership, opportunities for growth, opportunities for long-term commitment. And these are the kinds of things that colleges are looking for when it comes to that extracurricular list. They would rather see a student with 3 or 4 extracurriculars across their high school career and show significant contributions and growth within those 3 or 4 than a student who has, say, maybe 10 or 12 extracurriculars that they all started in their junior year. In fact, most colleges will tell you that that somebody who all of a sudden becomes Mr. Extracurricular or Ms. Extracurricular in their junior year, it's basically padding the resume, and that actually is a turnoff for colleges. So extracurriculars are very important. The other one, of course, is that there are those students who are convinced that they don't stand a chance of really winning over the committee with their extracurricular work because they have to take care of younger siblings. Well, again, they can't take that into consideration if you don't tell them, but they get it. You know, if you can't be on the chess club because you have to take care of 2 younger siblings while your parents are working, that's a pretty legitimate thing, and it's also a leadership activity. So again, with the extracurriculars, it will be important to sort of keep that in mind as we proceed with building the extracurricular list. So extracurriculars, big part of that. Essays, student essays, also known as student personal statements. And again, the goal here is for the student to talk about who they are, what they care about, and what life means to them. And so you know, this is always, I always sort of have to chuckle when I work with students about essays, because, you know, particularly with social media, these kids are talking about themselves all the time. And I mean, and sometimes not in very flattering ways, but they don't know that. But through everything from, Snapchat to TikTok to whatever, these students are revealing parts of themselves and their personality in lots of vital ways. And so when you say, okay, great, now it's time to tell the colleges who you are, they tend to freeze because they think that they're writing a book report. They think they're writing, some factually based thing. Now, of course, I'm not suggesting they'll make up stuff about who they are. But there's a lot of room in the student essay to really convey what you care about, what you think about, sort of more of what are referred to as these soft answers in the college admissions process. And that's really important. What I tell students to do is, is to think about the student essay as your part of an interview. If college, if University of Michigan had its way, they would bring every student to campus for an hour interview, give them a tour, buy them lunch, have them back in and chat with them a little bit more in the afternoon, and then send them home. Well, the University of Michigan had something like 91,000 applicants last year. So if they did that as part of the admissions process, it would likely be very effective, but they wouldn't be admitting many kids until they're like 45 years old. So the essay takes the place of that interview, right? As an admissions officer once said, the goal of an effective student essay is for the college officer to look up from their computer screen after they're through reading it, and to be surprised that you aren't in the room talking with them directly. If you can get to that level of intimacy, that level of conversation, you've achieved your goal as far as the student essay is concerned. Right. Okay. Teacher and counselor essays. Again, we're going to chat more about these in the month to come. But basically right now, what I'll leave you with, in case you're unable to make that seminar, these are letters with 2 different purposes. And so the teacher letter basically is supposed to address the simple question: which is, what's it like to work with the student in the classroom? And again, this is where my classroom colleagues, the teachers that I've worked with, many of them mean well, but they sort of take it upon themselves to try and be an all-encompassing letter writer and talk about every aspect of the students' lives. Other teachers tend to spend this time writing about how long they've been in the business, and so they why the colleges should consider their letter to be better than everybody else's. There's lots of stuff teachers put in these letters that they really don't need to. They just need to sort of focus on this simple task. So for teachers, that's the goal. For counselors, the real task here is to try and convey some sense of who the student is and what their place is in the school community. And again, we'll get into this more next month. And so I hope that's enough for now, but I also hope it serves as an enticement for you to come back and we can continue to have that conversation. Okay, other parts of holistic review. And this one, sometimes we run up to with some opposition to this one, but there are many colleges that feel that something like demonstrated interest is very important. You know, one of the good pieces of things like Common Application and other online application resources, these all make it much easier for the student to apply. The downside, however, of all of that ease is that sometimes we find that students may be applying to schools without giving a lot of thought as to whether this is a good fit for them. And we've talked about fit in previous seminars. And so, you know, as the college wants to open its doors to lots of students, they also want to make sure they're opening doors to students who have taken the time to think a little bit about what the college is and what going there means to the student. And so demonstrated interest can include everything from visiting college campus. It can include contact with the admissions office. In some cases, colleges will count answering college emails as demonstrated interest. If the college comes to your high school, they will definitely want to make sure that attending the high school visit is a big part of demonstrated interest as well. Now, demonstrated interest sort of runs into some trouble with a few folks because they say, look, you know, not every kid can afford to take the time or to spend the money on visiting the college campus. And for most schools that have a demonstrated interest factor in their holistic review recipe, they understand that, they get that. And so college visits isn't the only measure they use to determine if the student has demonstrated interest in the school. So that is, now on the other hand, if the campus is simply an hour away from where the student lives, that's really kind of a different story. And at that point, they're going to say, look, you know, we're a pretty easy car ride from where you live. We think you can try and figure out how to get here and make sure that you're making a wise choice by understanding what fits. I guess it would also say another way that they measure demonstrated interest is through what's called the Why Us essay. This is an essay that lots of colleges are now using that basically says, you know, what is it about our school that really sort of makes it work for you? And those Why Us essays can be tricky because they usually aren't very long. They usually have a limit of somewhere between 150 and 200 words. But and so the student really has to come up with a great answer, but it has to be something more than just, you know, great football team, love the food. And so, you know, I guess I would just say, as you work with your students, make sure they understand that even though the Why Us essay may have a very small word limit, it is in some respects the most important essay because it conveys what the student knows about the college. And so that turns out to be, fairly important as well. So, so holistic review, again, extracurriculars, student essays, teacher and counselor essays, demonstrated interest. Those tend to be sort of the bigger factors in a typical holistic review. And then the one that has been a traditional part of holistic review that's actually sort of on the verge of changing is, of course, an interview. And part of this has to do with the fact that COVID has required us to limit, in some cases, the number of students who are willing to do an in-person interview, whether it's near their high school or whether it's at the college campus. In other situations, the interview has just proven to be really kind of tough because there are simply so many applicants that are applying to the college that they don't have enough people to conduct interviews with all students. So obviously, if the college does require an interview, and if the interview is an integral part of things, the student's going to want to be well prepared for that and practice answering questions and asking questions. But the interview is not as common as many students think. And for many, they see that as a sign of relief. Again, I've never understood why they feel that way, because, if you love the place and you know who you are, you should be looking forward to the opportunity to chatting about with the college rather than fearing it immensely. So I think I think the interview is again a less important part or a less frequent part of holistic review, but once it shows up, it is something you're going to want to pay attention to. So that's a valuable piece as well. And again, with the interviews, there are also many colleges who have alumni do the interviews. And generally speaking, if a college has the alumni doing the interviews, the alumni will have the opportunity to give some input about the student, but it usually has less value in the admissions process, simply because alumni are not necessarily extremely well trained to read the rest of the record, and in fact may not have access to that record. So they're actually asking the alumni to interview them and just give some general impressions about how they would fit with the college. Okay, so that's sort of a quick review of holistic review. So the next question, of course, is, how colleges do holistic review. And much as I would love to tell you that I have the recipe for success here, I have to go back on what was the single biggest answer, most frequent answer in my career as a high school counselor, which is it depends. First of all, let me just say, every element of an application is important. And so every application part is important. And if they didn't want it, they wouldn't use it. So when you have a student who says, well, the essays don't matter that much, or the teacher letters don't matter that much, they are making an educated and probably an uneducated guess more than anything else, because the simple truth is, again, these colleges, the average highly selective school that does holistic review is really only in a spot where they're going to be able to devote maybe 4 to 6 minutes reviewing an applicant's file for the first read. And so, if given that small time period, if they didn't feel that, for example, the teacher letters had any value, they wouldn't ask for them, because they have lots of other stuff they can fill that 4 to 6 minutes with. So if a college is asking for a piece of information, it's going to be important for the student to take it seriously, and it's going to be very important for them to make sure that they're putting forth their best foot. So, so every application part is important. Otherwise, the college wouldn't use it. Again, to get back to the notion of it depends, there are a lot of schools who, while they will use while they will use other aspects of the student's application as supplemental material, most colleges that engage in holistic review, the GPA and the test score still continue to matter most. And of those two, the GPA is still probably the single biggest factor. Having said that, you know, the other piece, of course, that I think we sometimes undersell with GPA is the whole notion of strength of schedule. And so as we work with our students, it's not only important to make sure their grades are strong, but they're taking the highest and most demanding classes they can reasonably succeed in. And that, of course, varies with every student. But again, when a student is applying to a holistic review school, that's part of what they look at. They look at the grades, but they also look at the classes and determine if the student has really sufficiently challenged themselves. And colleges understand that there are some schools that allow students to do that more than others. There are some schools that have more APs or advanced classes or college course opportunities than others. But so it's important if your school has limited access to AP courses or honors courses, you want to make sure the college knows that. And that's where sometimes in the counselor letter, you can address the fact that the student has taken every challenging course they can at your high school. It's just that the offerings may have been somewhat limited. So, so GPA and test score still seems to matter most. Now, having said that, I can also tell you there are a few colleges out there, maybe even more than a few, where they read the student essays first. And that's a pretty significant statement right there. And so because, you know, really, as one rep told me, who she worked at a school where that's how they treated the file, they read the student essays before they looked at anything else, grades, test scores, where the kid was from. They read the essays first, and they said, well, I want to know who I'm talking to. I want to know who's talking to me. I want to know who I'm talking to. I want to know who I'm admitting. And the place where I go to for that is the essays. And so there will be more than a few schools where the essays will come first. Now, does that necessarily mean that they are most important? Well, most likely not. I don't know that of a school that would of many schools that would put the essays ahead of the GPA. But I do know that if you're going to read them first, that sets an impression, a mindset that really sort of shapes how you deal with all the other information, including the numbers. So, so there will be some schools where the first thing they're going to read is the student to get a sense of the student's voice. And that proves to be very important. So again, you know, this is again not true for all colleges, but it certainly is true for many. This also has a great deal to do with sort of, again, goes back to the quality of the teacher letter. And again, we'll chat more about this next month, but suffice it to say, you know, they're given caseloads, given the number of students they deal with, there are some teachers who justifiably really can't put everything they ordinarily would into a quality letter. That said, however, if the college does ask for teacher letters, that's in some cases, if the student is coming from a large public high school where the teacher doesn't have time to devote everything to a quality letter, they'll sometimes give that a pass. You know, but at the same time, they want to try and get great information, but they understand if they don't always get it. So with the places that ask for teacher letters, they really are hoping for a strong letter in every instance. If it's clear to them that the teachers are just plain overworked, they can understand why the letter may not be everything it's supposed to be. And so that's an important process as well, important factor as well. So, you know, again, as each college comes up with its own equation for how to do a holistic review, you know, one of the things that they also take into account as they put together that recipe of reviewing college applications is they try and revisit their mission. You know, who are they supposed to serve? How diverse is the pool of applicants? These are all questions that they sort of have to take into consideration as they're shaping their formula and their process for using holistic review. So that's one of the reasons why it matters. You know, it varies greatly. It shouldn't be surprising that the colleges known, for example, for their engineering programs, will likely be a little more test and grade heavy than they will on other factors. That said, if the student has an extracurricular that includes great success in an engineering competition program, in a robotics program, these are also the things those colleges like to see, because they know that it ultimately shows that the student can be very successful in their appointed craft. So again, the mission really does drive a lot of the school putting together what it considers to be important in engaging in holistic review. The other thing that I'd say about how colleges do a holistic review that I think is important to keep in mind is, you know, has to do, of course, with our friend COVID. And this goes back to being test optional. Many colleges that are test optional, as I said before, are test optional because they had no choice. Now, that's not to say that they don't realize that test optional is the right thing to do or not, but the reality is they had to make this decision on short notice they basically had to make a forced decision, because they knew that if they still required test scores, then many students would not apply, and that could affect the quality of the applicant pool, the numbers in the applicant pool, and lead to a very, very different college experience. So, of course, the challenge is once you go test optional, the question then becomes, how do you read those files holistically that don't have test scores in them? Well, you know, again, to be fair, most colleges didn't have a whole lot of time to sort that out and had to sort of create their formula for review on the fly. I say this because what that means is that it very well could be that a college that went test optional 3 years ago is still in the process of tweaking their holistic review recipe. So when colleges come to visit you, if they do visit your high school, when you go visit colleges, if you have colleges, you know, I would certainly encourage you to take a look at the, you know, 10 colleges your students most likely apply to, and if those and if you aren't familiar with how they review a file, this is the time to call up the rep and ask that quick question. You know, what do you do with the information? How important is each piece? That's not an unreasonable request. In fact, it's a very important piece, because you can find out some information again about those institutional priorities that the college has that that are based on their mission and their philosophy that could surprise you. So again, you know, if your kids are heading to college, I think it would be important for you to know to spend the time to contact those top 10 high schools that get the most applications from you, and just say, so, you know, tell me the process. How does this work once the student submits all this paperwork? And I guess the other piece in terms of it depends is with institutional priorities that change every year. This is part of the admissions process most people either are not familiar with or forget. And the truth is that colleges will have different priorities for their class from year to year, depending on a number of factors. In some cases, it's how much aid they have. In some cases, it's if they need more students this year, if they need less students this year, if they feel that there are certain programs at their school that need more students, and students are majoring, the students majoring in that area may get better consideration than other students. So this is sort of a key component. You know, and this is particularly true in areas, this can be rather particularly true in things like athletics and the arts. As one of my colleagues once said, you know, Pat, if a student wants to apply to Harvard as a hockey goalie, and Harvard is graduating 3 of its hockey goalies that year, their chances of getting into Harvard just went up pretty significantly. On the other hand, if this student is a hockey goalie and Harvard has just admitted 3 hockey goalies as freshmen, his chances of getting admitted to Harvard just went down pretty significantly. It's the challenge with the institutional priorities is that they're usually not publicized, and they vary greatly from year to year. So it's a little tough sometimes to get a handle of what those are. But again, there are some admissions reps who are fairly candid in letting you know what they may be looking for this particular year. So it is important when you're dealing with a college that does holistic review to understand what that process is, but it's also important to understand what the moving parts are from year to year, so that the advice you give this year may not be the advice you gave last year, simply because the college has changed its institutional priorities. Okay, so that's sort of a pretty quick guided tour through holistic review. We do have in the PowerPoint that you'll be getting, we do have some additional references with more information about holistic review and how it works. And so those will be available for you to take a look at as well. But it looks like we have a little bit of time for some Q&A if we have them.
Oh, yes, we do, Patrick. We have some great questions in the Q&A. I'll just ask the first one. Where can you find information about which colleges consider demonstrated interest as part of the holistic review process?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, to my knowledge, there is no list of those. I think, you know, it's probably safe to say if they're test optional, demonstrated interest might be more important, but your best bet would be to ask the admissions representative themselves about not only about demonstrated interest, but what they consider to be demonstrated interest. I was fascinated by the notion that some colleges can count demonstrated interest is if you open some of their emails, because these places send emails every 25 minutes,
Right.
whether they need to or not. And, you know, it could easily become the student's full-time job to just open emails. So, but yeah, this is is one of those things that sort of varies widely on a case-by-case basis. And so you're going to want to make sure to contact the school directly.
Great, great. The next one is, one of the most common questions I receive is it better to get an A in easier classes, therefore boosting GPA, or better to get a B in an AP class? How would you address this question? Awesome question. I
Yes.
get this one often as well.
Yes. Well, okay, here's the real answer. The answer is take the AP class and get an A.
Mhm.
That's it. And I've told that, I give that answer every year, and the students are like, no, you really don't understand. And it's like, well, actually I do. But that's the real answer. The real answer is don't make the college choose. So I guess I would say that, you know, as is the case with any schedule question, ask yourself, why are you taking the course? If you're taking the course because your goal is to up your GPA, because you've heard the college it really does use GPA pretty heavily, and you're going to want to take a course where your grade's going to be pretty strong. On the other hand, if the college is a place where they're looking for strength of schedule, and they're really expecting that you're going to challenge yourself significantly, then taking the higher course and risking a lower grade would be the wise thing to do. That said, I can tell you that what most students will do in that case, I'm sorry to say, is take the lesser challenging class for the grade, because they know that most places look at grades first, and degree of rigor is somewhere around third or fourth. So if we're looking at that as the formula, it would make sense to follow the harder GPA as a rule.
Great, great. The next one is, for highly selective colleges like Harvard, Yale, etc., how many APs should students be targeting to have a realistic shot?
Well, part of that depends on how many APs the high school offers. Even a place like Harvard is really not going to penalize a student if your high school offers no APs and you haven't taken any. You've still taken all the APs your high school offers. So you want to make sure that you understand that limit. It's not at all unusual for students applying to these schools to have somewhere in the neighborhood of 7-8 AP classes for high schools that offer that many. But again, keep in mind there's a little bit more behind that. The grades that you earn, AP scores are generally not part of the holistic review process for any high school or any college I'm aware of. So the scores don't necessarily matter all that much. But if I can tell you that if your high school offers, 10, 12, 15 APs, and you've only taken 1 or 2, that's going to show up on the strength of schedule factor, and that's going to play a pretty important role.
Patrick, Wendy Scott made a comment in the Q&A that you can identify whether a school practices holistic review by looking at the college data set. I haven't looked at that myself, but just that was a comment that was added.
Oh, great.
And then,
okay.
And then related to that, a question was asked: roughly what percentage of colleges use holistic review? Do you happen to have a rough idea?
Oh, golly. Boy, I don't. I wish I did, but I don't. I can tell you that if the college is a member of NACAC, NACAC puts a heavy emphasis on making sure colleges engage in holistic review. So that could be one of the indications that you can pay attention to. But I would imagine, as a general rule of thumb, I would say the more you can look at the selectivity rate, and once you get past, if a college is admitting something like 20% of their students or so of their applicants, it's likely they're doing some version of holistic review. The other way, quite honestly, is to look at the application. If the college is only asking for, if it's one of those 20-minute applications with name, address, what do you want to do, what classes are you taking, that's not a holistic school. And so that's pretty easy to read based on the application itself.
So I had a personal comment. By the way, Wendy just posted again and said she was referring to the demonstrated interest component when she mentioned the college data set.
Oh, okay.
And Patrick, do you know where folks would find the college data set that she's referring to? Because I'm not positive exactly what she's referencing there. Is it through iPads?
I do not, but I'm pretty sure it is through iPads. Yeah.
So a question I had actually is, at most of my prior institutions, we practiced holistic review, and I kind of looked down on schools that didn't practice holistic review. And now I'm working at a school that is really very black and white in its review. Do you have any comment on how you guide students when they're looking at schools that do versus don't practice holistic review?
Well, I think that would, for me, the first driving factor would be the students' GPA, and if they're submitting tests, their test scores. So I would sort of start with the number hardware and say, okay, does this accurately reflect who you are? And if, does the GPA show, does the GPA show your true ability as an academic student? And then the second question would be, tell me about the kind of college you would like to ultimately go to. And I think those would sort of drive me to then deciding if the students list needs to include more holistic review, or if holistic review doesn't matter as much. That's kind of the way I've always approached it.
So we got a couple of Madagawa and mentioned that you can just go to commondataset.org.
Oh, well, there you go.
That. So thanks, man.
I should have thought of that one. Yeah.
Could have faked your way through that one.
Yeah, darn. Yeah, missed an opportunity there.
No, that's okay. I was just going to mention that I've been a college and career counselor for almost 10 years, and I've never used college data set. So I thank you, Wendy and Matt. I'm anxious to check this out. And since this is College Counseling 101, I'm sure there's many, many counselors that don't, new to the profession, that don't know what that means. So thank you both, Wendy and Matt.
Yeah, absolutely.
A question here from Richard. What characteristics should admissions counselors be looking for in a recommendation letter from an employer?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that one's actually pretty easy. I would, I think you go back to the roots and say, well, what makes a good employee, and then read for those qualities. So punctuality, service, going the extra mile, taking advantage of room for advancement. Basically you want to get a little story about what it meant to have, in some ways, an employment letter of recommendation is very much like a teacher letter of recommendation, because the question is basically, what is it like to work with this student? And answering that question from all dimensions would lead for a very successful letter.
Then I think the last question we have lined up right now is, you mentioned that the strength of schedule is probably factor number 3 or 4. In your opinion, how would you prioritize all the factors for holistic admission?
Well, actually, I should have given you the website for this, but there's actually some information on NACAC. They actually survey the colleges on this very issue. And so again, I regret that I can't point you out to where that information is, but NACAC pretty regularly surveys its members and says, okay, how important are letters of recommendation? How important are student essays? All of these factors do get, and so colleges actually have responded to those. But I can tell you that year in, year out, again, the number one factor tends to be strength of schedule and GPA, and many colleges will actually consider that one factor, not 2, which I think is interesting because there are 2 dimensions to that factor. But that usually tends to be, by and large, far and away, the number one factor is grades. Other things sort of start to take a twist, and in fact, a couple of years ago, before COVID, the last time I took a look at that list from NACAC, the test scores were actually somewhere around 5th, which really surprised a lot of people. But again, that sort of shows that those essays and those teacher letters really do play an important role at a lot of institutions.
Great. Oh, go ahead, Palmer, if you were going to speak. But I might have misspoke. I might have said college data set, but it's actually common data set. Thanks, Lori and Wendy,
Okay.
for that information. Yeah, I called it the wrong thing, I think. So great. Oh my goodness, this was so helpful. Patrick, thank you. I learned quite a bit in today's session.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So,
no, great.
yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to chat about this.
Yeah, appreciate everyone joining us today too. And so we look forward to seeing you in February. Like Patrick mentioned, the next webinar is about, this is probably close to heart for many of us counselors, the letter of recommendation. So we look forward to hearing from you then, Patrick. Yeah, have a great day, everybody. Thanks so much.